I've had discussions with different people that sometimes bottles have secrets that they don't want to give up, and this might be one of those. I picked this up at a flea market a couple years ago, but I couldn't find the story for it back then. So I put it away to be looked at later, and then I just recently picked it back up. And, well, let's just assess what information is there, and we'll do the best we can with it, okay? On this episode of Antique Bottle Stories. Well, first let's talk about the bottle itself. What drew me to the bottle was the interesting font. It's a really clean, sparkly bottle. Maybe it was never thrown away, but it was kept somewhere in a box or something. It's machine made. This Owens mark on the bottom means that it was manufactured somewhere between 1918 and 1928. And we also see that it says Chicago on the bottle. So when I begin any story, I always Google the company and the person's name if I have it. I gather any articles, any pictures that I can find from Ancestry, newspaper.com, or the general web. Generally, there's no rhyme or reason. I just collect anything and everything. Once I get a handful of things, I start putting them into chronological order, and there's usually holes in the story at that point which needs more refining. And then one of the first things that I found for this particular bottle was this ad. A couple things to notice is that this bottle is different from mine, but there's a name here, Fred Fear, 15 J Street, New York City. I didn't find a date for this ad. And there's another picture that I found was this postcard, and this says, "A scene from the home of my wife's salad dressing, Marshall Field and Company, Chicago." So I was thinking, oh, this must be where it's made, in Chicago. But then I found this one showing the post office, and this one showing the Coliseum, and this one of Lincoln Park. So I'm getting it now. It's just postcards of sights to see in Chicago. So I decided to follow around this Fred Fear for a while. He was born in England in 1862, and he moved to Brooklyn, New York, and he was a grocer. Here he's in 1897, and he's listed as a manufacturer. The first time I see the dressing listed in the newspapers is 1898, and it's listed in North Adams, Massachusetts by a different guy, M.V.N. Brahman. Now this guy's a grocer as well. Okay, now here's another one in 1898, and this one's in Chicago. So at this point, I'm thinking, since they're all over the place, that this must be nationwide by the time I'm jumping into this story. But let's keep going. So here's an ad in 1903 listed in Rhode Island by another grocer. Here's a 1906 article in New York, and let's read some of it. It says, "My wife's salad dressing is a table sauce of the most delicious quality. It has a delicious flavor and a touch of it to every kind of meat, hot or cold, eggs, vegetables, etc. makes it more palatable. It's a relish that should be on every table, and those who have tried it have voiced its praises to the skies and are never without it. My wife's salad dressing is manufactured by Fred Fear and Company of New York and Chicago." Okay, finally we can connect some dots here. This concern has had years of experience in the manufacture of table sauces, and the above is the accomplishment of years of experience. I wish it would mention how many years. It continues, but there's really nothing more helpful in there. We see him in Brooklyn, New York here in 1897, the year before we see that first newspaper ad, and we don't see the Fred Fear Company yet. I was reminded how unhelpful the Chicago directories are on Ancestry. They only have half the book. So here in Chicago, I found the 1896 directory, and there's no Fred Fear nor his company. So this is bringing me to the conclusion that the Fred Fear Company was brand new when we saw that 1898 newspaper ad. Now, given Fred's grocery background, we still can't be sure whether Fred is the inventor of the salad dressing or if he just acquired it and he owns it. So let's follow him around some more. In 1910, I found him in the census at age 47, and it says he's a proprietor at a grocery store. In 1912, I found the dressing listed under Fred Fear Chicago. Also in 1912, another ad in the paper for it. I just found some really random stuff, like here's a little ad in a magazine in 1915 for an automated weighing machine company with a quote testimonial from a factory manager from my wife's salad dressing company. And look at this, I noticed that it also says my wife's pure cane and maple syrup. I'm kind of interested in the address here. It mentions again the 15 J Street, New York. So that's this building. It still stands and it looks like it's being used still. What's cool about this place is that if you look, there seems to be some remnants of some trolley tracks. This whole road that seemingly was a very busy road at one time is now a dead end. Let's look at this address in 1933. It says the foot of Girolamo Street, which I've seen a few times when it says the foot of. It just means it's at the end of the street, and we can clearly see in this picture that the road ends here because it meets the river. Here's the current Girolamo Street, and here's the foot of it, meeting the water. And this is what this looks like now. Now let's look at the Chicago location, 46 East Huron Street in Chicago. Well, that would be this building, and that covers between 40 and 50 East Huron. So here's a 1930 census with Fred Fear and his wife Eliza, along with 2 servants. Now, him and his wife only had 1 child, and he died at the age of 4. So this lists him as a match manufacturer at this point. Well, I did see that he branched out into Easter egg dyes, and here's some stationery. And remember we mentioned that syrup? Well, this has Fred Fear's name on it. So he manufactured a bunch of items in his factory. 1925 was the last ever ad that I find for my wife's salad dressing. I have no idea what happened to it, whether he sold the recipe to someone or he just discontinued it. 1933, Fred died at the age of 70. His wife had just died the year prior. His obituary says that he was found by his butler when he failed to rise as usual. It says he owned my wife's salad dressing company, and I just wanted to point out that if he was the one who invented it, it may have worded it that way, but it just says that he owned it. We really don't have any reason not to believe he invented it, but just what makes me think that he didn't is that he's a grocer, as opposed to if this was his invention, why didn't he just specialize in that? But to continue, it says he also organized his Fred Fear and Company firm. He was also president of 2 building and property companies, and he was also the director of the Federal Match Company and director of Empress Oil and Gas Company. So he had quite a bit going on. So we already looked at my bottle, and I wanted to show some of the other examples. This twisty looking top seems to be the more popular bottle that I find online, and according to this source, they were made from about 1900 through 1920 and were made with the manganese glass, meaning that they would turn purplish if left in the sunlight. Some of the twisty tops were blown, and later they were machine made. Remember, mine was produced between 1918 and 1928, so they probably overlapped time-wise. Since mine is crispy machine made, most likely it's more towards the later of that time frame. Here's one more bottle variation. And let's talk about these really cool colored twisty tops. Well, if you have one of these, apparently there were some replicas made in the 1960s and 70s, and they were made in this light amber yellow and this teal blue color. The originals were only made in the clear glass. And that's all I was able to pull out of this story. I hope it's helpful in some kind of way, and we'll see you on the next one, guys. Have a wonderful day. Thanks for watching.